Science is the most reliable way to generate knowledge that we have to date. It is based on methods, observations, experiments, and dissemination, approaches found to advance research while staying as far away as possible from our beliefs and desires. This ensures, to a certain extent, the necessary neutrality that enhances credibility. However, even though it is one of our best options, we know it is not infallible. We're not just talking about the errors that are occasionally made because they are part of the process, but also about the things that still elude us and lack a plausible explanation. Many of these challenges lie, for example, in the mysteries of the universe, while others are contained within small objects, as we'll see. Today, we will introduce you to some items that seemingly harbor some evil and that nobody can explain precisely how or why this happens. These artifacts range from stolen religious pieces to utensils, but they all share one thing in common: they always seem to disrupt the peace or life of those who ignore warnings and insist on keeping them in their possession. Now, let's delve into cursed objects that even scientists fear. Okika Doll. There are several tales about cursed dolls, many of which have even spawned movie franchises. But what I'm about to share with you will send shivers down your spine, literally. It all began in Japan in the early 20th century, to be precise, in 1918. A young man of merely 17 years old was casually strolling down the street when he spotted a doll in the display window of a shop. She was very beautiful, dressed in a kimono, with a short and quite distinctive haircut called okappa. Despite the tough times of a significant economic recession, he decided to buy it as a gift for his 3-year-old sister. Her name was Kikuko, and he decided to name the toy after her, Okika. It was the best gift the little girl had received in her short journey through life. She played with her new friend all the time, never letting her out of sight, not even at bedtime. The brother was very pleased, of course, as the sacrifice he made to give her the gift was worth it. However, unfortunately, the joy didn't last long. About a year later, Kikuko and her family were struck by a sudden illness, either a severe flu or a yellow fever outbreak, depending on the version of the story. As the little girl was very small and fragile, she didn't survive and passed away at the age of 4. As is customary in Japan, especially at that time, Kikuko's body was cremated, and her ashes were placed in an urn that would be kept on an altar in the family's home. As part of the ritual, loved ones could place some cherished object of the departed, something they would have liked to take with them to the afterlife. However, there are some rules, the main one being that it must be something flammable, like food or a letter. Naturally, the parents and the girl's brother tried to place the doll, but the funeral home didn't allow it. So, they decided to place it on the altar they had prepared to receive Kikuko's ashes, so they could remain together, a symbol, a kind of reliquary that would help them keep fond memories of the child's time in this world. And so it was for some time. The family gathered periodically to pray and pay homage before the altar. But gradually, they noticed Okika's hair was growing. Initially, she had a short okappa cut, reaching the ears, but now the locks were falling onto the doll's shoulders. Thinking it was just their imagination, they trimmed it and went on with their lives. However, the hair kept growing more and more, until the family became convinced that the spirit of the child was living inside her favorite toy. The case wasn't widely publicized at the time, likely because Japan's strict codes wouldn't have viewed such exposure favorably. For several years, the family had to move several times, but they always took Okika with them, as if they were actually carrying the young girl's spirit with them. This arrangement lasted until the mid-1930s when World War II broke out, and Kikuko's brother had to serve in the conflict. By then, their parents were already unwell due to their advanced age, so they decided to leave the doll in the care of monks residing in a temple. There, the object and the entity could be well looked after. The child's relatives did return to the temple to pay homage, but they decided that she would be better cared for there. Hence, they left her at the location where she resides to this day. The only test that could be conducted by a scientist validated that her hair was indeed human, but no other experiment was possible as it would have violated the monastery's rules and beliefs. It is said that even today, it's possible to see her locks growing, and they are trimmed from time to time during certain ceremonies. Robert the Doll, but the eerie tales involving toys don't stop there. In fact, they can get much worse, as we'll see in this next case. Let's head to Key West, a city in the state of Florida, United States. There lived a boy named Robert Eugene Otto, or simply Gene, as he was known. It was the early 1900s, and he received a doll made by one of the family's maids, which soon became his inseparable companion. He even named it after himself, the doll Robert. However, it didn't take long for various strange occurrences to disturb not only the child but also his family and other household staff who were part of the daily routine. Frequently, Gene was heard conversing with someone in his room on the second floor. Two voices could be heard, but when they checked, it was just him and Robert playing. Moreover, the boy would often wake up in the middle of the night in tears, and when his parents came to his aid, they found everything in disarray, objects misplaced and broken. When questioned, the answer was always the same: it was Robert. Be careful, ma'am, it was Robert. The same argument arose when other toys were found out of place or mutilated around the house. The culprit was always the doll. Gene's parents even began to think that all this was the child's fault, attributing the consequences of his misbehavior to the doll. However, they themselves and the staff heard strange sounds throughout the house, sinister laughter, and they always found Robert in a different place in the residence, no matter where he was left. Eventually, Gene's parents passed away, and he inherited the property. He became an artist and worked from home, hardly ever leaving. Perhaps he had grown accustomed to it, or he was overtaken by the malevolent force that possessed the doll. But they remained together until the end. Some say he got married, but Robert allegedly drove his wife insane. They even claim that the man was found dead next to the doll. For those who swear by the truth of the story, the doll was cursed by the maid who made it and gave it to the boy because the family treated her and the other staff very poorly. Nowadays, the doll is housed in the Fort East Martello Museum in the same American city where everything unfolded. Numerous tourists who visit the artifact report having trouble with their cameras when trying to take unauthorized photos. To this day, it's unclear why no further investigation has been conducted. Perhaps these events didn't catch the attention of scientists, or perhaps there was simply no one with the courage to initiate an investigation. The cursed chair. Let's set aside the toys for now and explore other objects that defy logic and instill fear in those unlucky enough to cross their path. Enter Thomas Busby, who lived in the English county of North Yorkshire in the 18th century. He was known for his illegal activities, conducted with his father-in-law, as well as the cursed legacy he left for the people of that region. When he married Elizabeth, daughter of Daniel Allett, he proved to be a very ambitious young man and quickly caught the attention of his father-in-law. Together, they engaged in various crimes, ranging from counterfeiting coins to scams at an inn they owned. They had a good relationship and cooperated for the success of their illegal business ventures. However, there was an obstacle between them. Thomas had serious issues with alcohol abuse. One day, during a heated argument exacerbated by Thomas's drunkenness, he ended up taking his father-in-law's life in a fit of rage. The police found him the next morning at the scene and he was arrested, tried, and sentenced to hanging for murder. All this happened in less than a year. On the day of his execution, Thomas made one final request. He wanted to have a drink in his favorite chair. His wish was granted, and he was taken to the inn for his final binge. As he was being escorted by the police to the execution site, Thomas uttered countless incomprehensible words and phrases. But one thing was clear: he cursed anyone who dared to sit in his chair ever again. No one took him seriously at the time, but things were never the same there again. It's said that the first victim claimed by the chair was an unsuspecting chimney sweep who sat down to rest and lost his life during the break. Shortly after, within a few days, Another guest who was unaware of the case sat in the cursed chair and was found dead the next day near the spot where Thomas was executed. During World War II, the inn became quite popular, and several soldiers who were going to fight in the Great Conflict passed through. None who dared to rest in Thomas Busby's chair returned home. Over the years, it's said that the chair claimed over 60 victims, all dying shortly after sitting in it. Some met accidents, while others had apparent causes, but the fact remains that no one survived. Nowadays, the chair resides in the Thrisk Museum in the United Kingdom, hanging on the wall to prevent anyone from sitting in it by accident. There's no plausible explanation for the case, but there have been no volunteers to test the theory either, leaving the mystery unsolved. The cursed mummy. Our next artifact is much older and perhaps falls within the realm of objects cursed by the ancient Egyptian gods, who were not to be disturbed in their eternal rest. This article became known as the cursed mummy, but there's no body wrapped in bandages here, just the lid of a sarcophagus. In the 1860s, 5 recent graduates from Oxford University embarked on a trip to Egypt. There, they encountered some smugglers who had stolen a relic found during excavations at an archaeological site, the lid of a coffin belonging to a priestess of Ammonius Ra. It was said that the high priests of the Egyptian god placed various spells on their tombs to ensure their peace during eternal rest. However, these young men didn't seem to care much about that. They decided to acquire the piece as a souvenir of their trip, but soon regretted it. On the way back to the capital city of Cairo, 2 men from the group died. To this day, the exact causes are unknown, but they apparently paid for their mistake with their lives. But that's not all. While still in Egyptian lands, a 3rd man accidentally shot himself in the arm and had to have it amputated. From this point on, they realized they had meddled with something they shouldn't have. Another member of the group returned to England but became involved in gambling and betting, losing his entire fortune in no time. The last member also tried to distance himself, moving to America, but he too lost everything after suffering from a flood and a fire. Clearly, the priestess depicted on that lid did not want to be disturbed. Don't you agree? Look at it, death and the escape of all the young men who acquired the artifact. It ended up with the sister of one of them, who had asked to take some photos. Shortly afterward, both the photographer and even the building's doorman who received the package died suddenly. A man who requested access to the piece to decipher the hieroglyphs suffered the same fate. It's no wonder the object became known as the cursed mummy, right? It's even said that it was behind the sinking of the Titanic because a journalist, a potential buyer depending on the version, who had been in contact with it, was on board and couldn't stop talking about the sarcophagus lid. Well, whether that's true or not, we don't know. The fact is that nowadays it's in a museum, and while its access is restricted, those who insist on getting too close may end up sealing their fate. Would you like to learn more about other cursed objects? Comment below for us to know, and I'll be here until next time.